Imagine a wall so thick that a team of 4 horses could race along the top. Imagine a city so wealthy that its gates were cast in solid bronze. Its walls were glazed in blue brick, shimmering like a mirage in the desert sun. This city covered nearly 4 square miles. It was a grid of perfect order. Even ancient Rome at its height would pale in comparison. It had food reserves to last 20 years. It had the Euphrates River flowing right through its heart. To the ancient mind, Babylon was an impregnable fortress. And yet, it fell in a single night. History tells us it was a military masterstroke. The Bible tells us it was the judgment of God. How did the greatest city on earth vanish? How does a civilization that invented modern mathematics and astronomy simply disappear? Today, we peel back the layers of history. We will look at the prophecies written centuries before the event, and we will see exactly how Babylon was destroyed. To understand the fall, we must understand what was lost. We have to go back to the banks of the Euphrates River, about 50 miles south of modern-day Baghdad. Babylon was not new. It had been there for centuries. But the Babylon we know, the one from the Bible and the history books, was the work of one man, King Nebuchadnezzar II. He was a builder on a scale that is hard for us to comprehend today. When he took the throne in 605 BC, he didn't just renovate the city, he transformed it. He built the Ishtar Gate. You may have seen parts of it in museums. Bright blue tiles adorned with dragons and bulls. It wasn't just decoration, it was a message. It told every visitor, we are wealthy, we are powerful, and our gods are watching you. In the center of the city stood the Itamananki. This was a massive ziggurat, a temple tower rising 300 feet into the air. Many scholars believe this structure inspired the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. It was the heart of their religion, dedicated to their chief god Marduk. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't just build temples, he built for love. Legend tells us that his wife, Amytis, missed the green mountains of her homeland. The flat, dusty plains of Mesopotamia made her sad, so the king built a mountain for her, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. One of the 7 wonders of the world. Think of the engineering required here. They didn't have electric pumps. They used a complex system of chains and buckets to lift water from the river, tier by tier, to keep these gardens blooming in the middle of a scorching desert. It was a paradise. The people of Babylon were brilliant. They gave us the 60-second minute and the 60-minute hour. They tracked the path of Jupiter with geometry that Europeans wouldn't discover for another 1,400 years. They were the center of the world. And like many great powers, they began to believe they were untouchable. Pride, as the saying goes, comes before the fall. But there was a dark side to this golden city. Babylon was a predator.
In 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar's army marched on Jerusalem. They destroyed the Temple of Solomon. They burned the city, and they dragged the Jewish people back to Babylon in chains. This period is known as the Babylonian captivity. For the Jews, it was a time of weeping. As Psalm 137 says, "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion." But while the captives wept, their prophets were writing. This is where the story gets chilling. Years before Babylon fell, long before the Persian army ever gathered, the Hebrew prophets laid out exactly how the city would meet its end. The prophet Jeremiah, writing around 600 BC, predicted that the captivity would last exactly 70 years. He said Babylon would become a heap of ruins, a dwelling place for jackals, never to be inhabited again.
But the prophet Isaiah was even more specific. Writing over 100 years before the event, Isaiah actually named the man who would conquer Babylon. He wrote, "Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to open before him the double doors, so that the gates will not be shut." Think about that. He named the conqueror, before the conqueror was even born. He mentioned double doors and gates that would be left open. Keep that detail in mind. It will become very important in a moment. Fast forward to the year 539 BC. Nebuchadnezzar has been dead for decades. The current ruler in the city is Belshazzar. Outside the city walls, a massive army has gathered. It is the combined forces of the Medes and the Persians, led by Cyrus the Great. Now, in any other city, a siege would cause panic. The king would be on the wall, checking the defenses. He would be rationing food. He would be praying. But not in Babylon. Belshazzar was not afraid. Why should he be? The walls were too high. The river provided unlimited water. The storehouses were full. He looked at Cyrus's army outside and laughed. In an act of supreme arrogance, Belshazzar decided to throw a party. But not just any party. He wanted to make a point. He ordered his servants to bring out the gold and silver goblets that his grandfather had stolen from the temple in Jerusalem. These were sacred vessels dedicated to the God of Israel. Belshazzar and his nobles drank wine from these holy cups and praised their gods of gold, silver, bronze, and iron. It was a direct challenge, a mockery. Suddenly, the music stopped. The Bible records that the fingers of a human hand appeared. It began to write on the plaster of the palace wall. The king's face turned pale, his knees knocked together. The party was over.
The words were Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. The king called for his wise men, but they couldn't explain it. Finally, they brought in Daniel, an old man by now, one of the Jewish captives who had served Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel didn't mince words. He told the king, "You have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven." He interpreted the message, Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Daniel told him, tonight is the end. Belshazzar probably thought, how? The walls are still standing. But he didn't know what was happening just a few miles upstream. While the Babylonians were drinking, Cyrus the Great was working. Cyrus was a genius strategist. He knew he couldn't climb the walls. He knew he couldn't starve them out. So he looked at Babylon's greatest strength, the Euphrates River, and decided to turn it into their greatest weakness.
Historians like Herodotus give us the details. Cyrus took a portion of his army and sent them upstream, far out of sight. Their job was to dig. They dug a massive canal to divert the flow of the river into a nearby marshland basin. It was a colossal engineering feat, done in silence. Back at the city, the main force of the Persian army stood waiting at the point where the river flowed under the giant city walls. They waited for the signal. Slowly, the water level began to drop. It went from chest-high to waist-high to knee-high. The unbreakable defense system of Babylon had a fatal flaw. The riverbed was the highway into the city. Now, you might ask, weren't there internal gates along the riverbanks? Yes, there were. Bronze gates that led from the river up to the streets. If those gates had been closed, the Persians would have been trapped in the mud and slaughtered. But remember the prophecy of Isaiah, the gates will not be shut. Because of the festival, because of the arrogance, because of the sheer belief that they were safe, the guards had left the river gates unlocked. The Persian soldiers, led by a general named Gobryas, waded through the mud, climbed the slippery banks, and pushed open the bronze doors. They were inside, and the city was asleep. The historical accounts, like the Cyrus Cylinder and the Chronicle of Nabonidus, tell us that the army entered Babylon without a battle. It happened so fast that people on one side of the city didn't know the other side had fallen. The Persians marched straight to the palace. The sound of celebration turned into screams. The king, Belshazzar, was killed that very night, just as Daniel had said. When Cyrus formally entered the city, he didn't burn it down. He didn't slaughter the population. He walked in as a liberator. In fact, Cyrus did something that no conqueror had ever done before. He told the captives, including the Jews, that they could go home. He returned the stolen vessels of the temple. He gave them money to rebuild Jerusalem. This is why Cyrus is the only non-Jewish king in the Bible to be referred to as God's anointed, or Messiah, in a secular sense. He was the instrument used to break the pride of Babylon. But wait, the prophecy said Babylon would be a desolate heap, inhabited only by wild beasts. Yet Cyrus left the city standing. It remained a wealthy capital for the Persians. So, was the prophecy wrong? No. Biblical prophecy often has an immediate fulfillment and an ultimate fulfillment. The death of Babylon wasn't a heart attack, it was a long, slow, painful cancer. 200 years later, Alexander the Great marched in. He wanted to make Babylon the capital of his new empire. He planned to restore the Great Ziggurat. He ordered the rubble cleared away. But Alexander died suddenly in that very city at the age of 32. With him died the last hope for Babylon's revival. His successors fought over the scraps. They built a new capital, Seleucia, on the Tigris River nearby. They forced the people of Babylon to move there. Slowly, year by year, the life drained out of the city. The canals silted up. The water that once protected the city now flooded it, turning the glorious capital into a swamp. By the time of the Roman Empire, a visitor wrote that the great city had become nothing but walls and wilderness. The prophecy was unfolding. The stones were being taken away by locals to build simple houses in other towns. The glorious blue tiles were buried under the dust. For nearly 2,000 years, Babylon was a ghost town, just mounds of dirt. But in the 20th century, one man tried to defy history. Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq, saw himself as the new Nebuchadnezzar. He spent millions of dollars trying to rebuild the city.
He built new walls right on top of the ancient ruins. He even stamped his own name onto the bricks, just like the ancient kings did. He wanted to bring the glory back. He wanted to prove that Babylon could rise again. But look what happened. In 2003, his regime fell. The site of Babylon became a military depot. Heavy tanks crushed the ancient pavements. Soldiers filled sandbags with soil mixed with archaeological artifacts. Saddam's palace, built on a nearby hill to overlook the ruins, sits empty today. It is a hollow shell, covered in graffiti. He tried to resurrect the dead, but he only added another layer of ruin. Today, if you visit Babylon, you will feel a strange sensation. It is vast. It is silent. We sent a team to look at the site, comparing it to the words written by Isaiah 2,700 years ago. Isaiah wrote, "It will never be inhabited or lived in for all generations, but wild beasts of the desert will lie there." Walking through the ruins of the Temple of Marduk, once the most holy site in the pagan world, you don't find worshippers. You don't find tourists. You find fox dens. You find the tracks of wolves. Local villagers will tell you that the place is infested with jackals and scorpions. The palaces where emperors decided the fate of the world, they are now the homes of owls and bats. The contrast is terrifying. The most populated city on earth is now completely empty of human life. There are towns near it, there are villages around it, but inside the ancient walls, no one lives there. It is exactly as the book of Jeremiah said, a land where no man lives. History is full of fallen empires. Rome fell, but Rome is still a bustling city today. Athens fell, but people still live in Athens. Babylon is different. Babylon was judged. It stands as a warning. It reminds us that no amount of gold, no thickness of wall, and no military might can save a nation that loses its soul. The river that made them rich was the path to their destruction. The pride that made them feel safe was the blinder that hid the enemy. The story of Babylon is not just ancient history. It is a lesson on the fragility of power. The fall of Babylon changed the world. It allowed the Jewish people to return home, setting the stage for the events of the New Testament. It shifted the center of power from the Middle East to Europe. But there are other mysteries buried in the sands of the Middle East. Did you know that the ancient city of Nineveh has a story just as shocking as Babylon? If you want to uncover that mystery with us, make sure you are subscribed. We are diving deep into the archives for our next documentary. What do you think? Was the fall of Babylon just a military tactic, or was it divine destiny? I want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Click the video on your screen now to see another ancient mystery revealed. I'll see you there.